Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the September State Technical Committee meeting. These things come around quite often, it seems like. So here we are again. Appreciate everybody coming in and joining us. We have some really good updates here today, I think. So we'll get going in just a minute. Just want to let those who are calling in on the phones, just as a reminder, if you could email Tammy Nordman or myself to let her, well, just let her know that you were on. That would be appreciated. We do keep a copy of everyone who has called in on the phone and keep that on our attendance list. So that'd be much appreciated if you'd do that. I'll go ahead and try to remind you again as we go through the day, but that's kind of important. So it is now. It's just a little bit after 1 o'clock, and today I'll go ahead and just do some housekeeping. Then I'll turn it over to John Wilson, our new acting state conservationist, to make some opening comments if John is on. John, are you on the call yet?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and do a quick overview, and then I'll turn it over to you. So today, I hope everybody can see the agenda. I've got it shared on the screen. So John's going to do some opening comments, and then I'll hop in and give an update. I'll do a little bit of a recap of where we ended up in FY21 as far as EQIP obligations, at least. And then I want to talk a little bit about FY22 and get that kicked off. Tammy Timms is going to give us an update on RCPP and NWQI and some of the initiative programs. And then we're going to have an overview of the Nebraska Great Plains Grassland Initiative, which I'll mention that a little bit, and then we'll have a group of folks give us an overview on that. Have an update on the Eastern Sandhills Working Lands for Wildlife project, which has been very successful for us up in the Sandhills. Ryan Lodge will be giving that overview. And then the Farm Service Agency will be giving us an update and presenting some information on CRP. So those are kind of the topics of the day. And so with that, I'll just turn it over then to John for any opening comments that you have before we get started.
Okay, well, thank you, Brad. I guess, first of all, I just want to thank you all for joining us. And certainly it's important that you play a vital role in what we do in this state technical committee. So we thank you for coming. Certainly, we would like to have been face-to-face, but due to COVID restrictions, it did not allow it at this particular time. And hopefully, for our next meeting, we are able to meet face-to-face. But thank goodness for technology. It at least allows us to get together virtually to cover some business. Just a little about me. I started with the agency over 30 years ago as a student trainee in Michigan. And I had 3 stints as a student trainee, 1 fall and 2 summers, before starting with the agency full-time with the Soil Conservation Service at the time. And I went through basically a typical role as a soil conservationist in a couple of different locations, becoming a district conservationist. After about 5 years in the DC, I became an area specialist as an urban resource conservationist, looking at a river basin study in Southeast Michigan, before moving on to Ohio as an assistant for field operations, or AC. Did that for a while, and then I moved over, which was a big stretch. I moved over as a state administrative officer, where I focused primarily on human resources, budgeting, and contracting. And after a while, and through administrative transformation, I decided to move back over into the programs arena and become an assistant for And there, I was there up until this spring or June. Well, I became a deputy state conservationist in Arkansas. So that's kind of my route. I started acting here in Nebraska August the 16th, and I plan to be here roughly through mid-December. So I will probably be here when we have our next state committee meeting and hopefully state technical committee meeting, and hopefully it can be face-to-face, but that's something that time will tell. Again, I thank you guys for joining us, because your input is certainly essential. It helps us make sure that we're on the right track. We're addressing those resource concerns that stakeholders have identified. So it really helps us focus on what we need to be doing. I looked at the agenda. I feel like we have a really good agenda, and I look forward to the presentations as well as the discussion. With that, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, John. So I'll go ahead and jump right into the programs update. Let me see if I can switch the screen. Can I get a thumbs up that that my PowerPoint is being shared?
I can see it, Brad.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mary. So again, as I mentioned, I want to just do a kind of a quick overview of where we were in FY21, and then hop into some FY22 things. So I'll start with CSP. And so as of this month, we're currently sitting at a little over 2,300 CSP contracts in the state on a little over 4 million acres, with $166 million obligated in CSP. And so that, 2,300 is, that number will increase just a little bit. We're still in the process of approving some of our new, obligating some more contracts yet this year. So, but that'll be close. So again, a review a little bit of where we started in FY21. We ended up with a little over $10 million for the CSP Classic, and 9.3 million for the CSP renewals, and 400,000 for the Grassland Initiative. And I've mentioned this before at previous meetings that 5 or 6 years ago, you may remember our CSP Classic allocations were in the $20 million, $22 million range. So we have that has gone down for Nebraska, I think primarily because of increased acceptance and use of CSP across the country. But just point that out, that it isn't where we have been in the past. So this year, in FY21, those funds allowed us to obligate 82 contracts currently for the CSP Classic on 236,000 new acres. And as I mentioned, that number will increase by, half a dozen or so by the time we're done obligating here this year. And again, I'll point out that we continue to have a lot of interest in CSP in the state. Had over 1,100 applications, and will only be able to approve less than 100. And so it's a highly competitive program here in Nebraska. On the renewals, we had 289 folks applied for a renewal contract, and we're able to fund 95 of those on 184,000 acres. And a quick reminder on the renewals, everyone has got the option to apply for a renewal after their initial 5-year contract. However, now it is a competitive process to get approved for a renewal. And so that's why, again, in the past, you may have seen that all the renewals were approved, and now it's a competitive process. So just something to keep in mind there. We have thoroughly vetted when we're going to have application deadlines. Thank you to all the local work groups who who responded with their recommendations on when a good time is for application cutoff dates for our programs. Last year, November 19th was our CSP Classic application deadline, and that's what's being proposed again for this year. So November 19th will be our CSP Classic application deadline. There will be a separate deadline for renewals, but we'll announce that as the time comes. So there is one piece of business that I would like to get some feedback either today or soon. We're making a major shift with how we would like to manage our CSP fund pools moving forward. So as a reminder, currently and in the past, we have operated with 6 fund pools for CSP. And so what that meant was all the applicants within an area would be competing against each other. So area 1 applications would compete against everyone within that area, and area 2 and so on. We have talked for some time about revising these fund pool areas, and now with our software updates, our conservation desktop cart processes, it now makes sense to move to an allocation to the 23 local work group or to the 23 district conservationist administrative boundaries. So moving forward, that will be a fairly significant change within house in the fact that we will now be doing 23 ranking tools instead of the 6. But the new 23 fund pool process will now allow us to allocate funds directly to each local work group itself, and then be able to have ranking tools which specifically fit just the applicants within each one of those NRDs. So I'm going to stop for just a second right here and ask if there's any feedback or comments. If you have a verbal comment, just simply click on the microphone, which should be at the top toolbar on your screen, and go ahead and just speak, or go ahead and just put a comment in the comment box, and we can monitor that and try to answer any questions there as well. So any initial thoughts or reactions to moving from 6 fund pools to 23 for CSP Classic in FY22? Okay, well, if anybody's talking, we can't hear you, but appreciate this is kind of throwing it at you kind of cold. So if you do have any thoughts or comments about going to 23 fund pool areas for CSP, please send those in to me. Either give me a call, send an email, reply in the chat box here, the comments or that. So we sure love to get your feedback on that. Okay, I'll just kind of overview where we are with easements. Again, this will be review somewhat, but just an update from the last state tech meeting. Again, we had 37 eligible applications we received for the wetland reserve easements in FY21. We had an early application cutoff date last year on October 1st, and then process those applications through. If we were to fund them all, that would be 5,300 acres. We did get one ALE, ag land easement application, and that was on 6,200 acres. Reminder again that moving forward in FY21 and moving forward, we will be going to appraisals to establish the value for each one of our applications. We had used GARCs, geographic area rate caps, prior to FY21, but due to some changes in the appraisal processing and in the number of applications we're getting and different reasons, it just makes sense now that we would just do an appraisal for every application we have. And that doesn't mean that we would necessarily take the full appraised amount. We did set caps for in FY21, $8,900 would be the maximum rate that we would pay for a WRE easement, and on irrigated land, and $5,000 on all other land uses. So obviously, if the appraisal was under that, that's what the offer would be, but it wouldn't exceed that. So moving forward with the funds that we did receive, we're moving forward with processing 3 WRE applications on 835 acres. The appraised cost was about $2.3 million on those. We estimate about $600,000 it will take to restore these sites. Again, with the wetland reserve easements, the restoration costs are 100% paid by the government, and we're currently in the process of obligating those funds. Quick reminder on the floodplain easements, as you know, back in 2019, we had the floods and we were approved for floodplain easements. The update there of the 21 eligible applications, 4 of those have canceled or are now ineligible. And we're currently working on 17 of those applications. And if we're able to close all of those, we will have easements on about 3,800 acres at a little over $14 million cost for those. Still in the process of getting those closed. On the ALE application, we are continuing to work to get that obligated. That's moving along very nicely, and that'll be about a $1.4 million federal share on that ag land easement. We do actually now have 2 WREP projects in the state. So the one rep that was active in 21, we had 2 applications on 95 acres, and we're currently working to obligate those. A little more on the rep. And again, this is a review from before, but just as a reminder, we were fortunate enough to have another rep proposal approved, and that's within the Rainwater Basin area, and that began in FY21, and it'll be good for FY22 as well. Several partners for that rep, Nebraska Community Foundation, Rainwater Basin Joint Venture, the primary partners on that. It was approved for about $1.7 million from NRCS, and the goal is to get easements on 450 acres from that. This is the map of the area, the Rainwater Basin, Central Table Playas, which are eligible for that REP project. So now moving into FY22, I just want to remind everybody that even though we have application cutoff dates, we do take applications year round. And so at any time that there's a producer which is interested in an easement of any type, they shouldn't wait. They should come in. We can get them signed up. We can get that application process started and the review process. We have already announced the application cutoff date for FY22, and that is October 15th of 2021. And that's for wetland reserve easements, REP, and the ag land easements. So if you know of anyone who's interested, they can apply anytime, but to be considered for FY22 funding, we need to have those applications by October 15th. Again, as a review, we're going to use appraisals for all of those valuations on those applications. And one additional point that I would like to bring up here today, that I'd like some feedback, if we have any, either today or shortly thereafter, is I mentioned earlier that we had 37 applications last year for wetland reserve easements. And with the funding, we were only able to approve 3 of those. So it's pretty important that we somehow prioritize those applications. And we are now using what we call prioritization tools for our FAPD programs and our EPD programs. But we have used the prioritization tool in the past, and we have made some revisions to that. And I'm not going to go through that whole prioritization tool here today, but I just want to ask for those that we sent a copy of that tool out. We sent it to all of the easement subcommittee members that we have signed up. And it was short notice. We just got that out last week. Apologize for that. But if any of you who received that tool from us, if you do have any comments, please get them back to us soon, within the next week or so that we can move forward with and have that in place for that October 15th application cutoff date. And if there's anybody else who would like a copy of that tool, that prioritization tool, just drop me a note and we'll send that to you so you can review it and get us some comments as well. I'll stop there quick and see if there's any comments or feedback on the ASAP prioritization tool. Okay, well, hearing none, again, if you do want to see that, or if you did receive a copy, then just give us a shout back, whether you support it or if you have any comments. We have got some good feedback already, so thanks for those that sent that in. Okay, moving on to EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentive Program, just a little bit on FY 2021. So as in FY 21, as of yesterday, we obligated 1,040 contracts, new contracts in 2021, with our allocation of 26.7 million, and that covers all of the local fund pools, all the state fund pools, and that. And so had another good year. We're generally able to approve around 1,000 new contracts every year. So then total active contracts, if you look at everything going back the last 3 or 4 years, it's still active. We're about 2,600 active contracts on 1 million acres. And that obligated a little over $83 million, which is in current active contracts. So where did that money go? Just a couple quick charts for that. This is a listing of the state fund pools that we had in FY21. And just to give you an idea of where that money went, I don't have a listing of the local fund pools, the funds that we've sent out to the local work groups here today, but just to give you an idea, the organic transition to contracts, the Nebraska Working Lands for Wildlife project area, and the Sandhills Working Lands for Wildlife, and Ryan Lodge will be talking more about that here in a little bit. Very successful. We had 22 contracts last year, about $350,000 was obligated. And won't go through every one individually. The HEL treatment, that was a fund pool which we will not be using anymore. But if you remember, that was a fund pool that we set up to give assistance to producers who had some HEL compliance issues that they had to get on top of. There were some slight rule changes with how that was laid out. So this was for someone who was determined to have some issues with their compliance, and they were able to compete in this fund pool for erosion control practices. So 23 of those. The Wildlife Initiative, the WIN, we'll be talking a little bit more about that here soon as well. This is a fund pool which we are required to allocate 10% of our total funds towards. And this year we started with 94 applications in the Wildlife Initiative. We funded 81, which was after the cancellations and the folks which maybe there were some eligibility issues. We funded every eligible application is what I'm trying to say. And so we came up a little bit short on what we wanted to spend and when, but our 10% also includes practices which we funded through other local fund pools and that. So that doesn't mean that we were that much short of meeting our 10%, but that's what we spent through the WIN fund pool. Again, going on, the NWQI had 48 total contracts, and Tammy Tim, she'll be talking a little bit more about breaking that down a little bit farther. Seasonal high tunnels, the high tunnels get quite a bit of press, and we have a lot of interest in high tunnels, have for some time here in the state. Of the 35 applications, we ended up funding 26. Again, that was all that we ended up with that were eligible or that didn't cancel. 9 animal feeding operations, 1.4 million. So we had some really good projects there that we funded. I'll mention the conservation activity plans. We had 50 of those this year. And a quick reminder on CAP plans, conservation activity plans. That is a way that a producer can hire a technical service provider to develop a plan prior to making an application for financial assistance. And of those 50, the majority were for burn plans, prescribed burn plans, the majority of them, and then there were quite a few for nutrient management plans. And so those are the primary plans that we fund here in the state. I think there was a few organic transition plans and that. So that's good. We're getting a lot of good activity with the conservation activity plans. Source water protection, I'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute as well. Source water protection is another one of those that we're mandated to spend 10% of our EQIP general allocation towards. And so that would have been roughly, 2.5 million. We exceeded that this year. We were able to fund 73 contracts in the source water protection. So far fewer than the number of applications we actually received. So it's I think we have it set up well. And like I said, I'll mention a little bit more about that in just a minute. So anyway, quick overview there, but just kind of give you an idea of where we were in FY21. I apologize for this slide. It's a little small, a little blurry, but I would just break down on the wildlife initiative. What did we fund? What type of practices did we approve in FY21? And this gives you a snapshot, kind of top to bottom, the most popular practice within WIN down to the the least cost practice. So brush management by far and away was the most used practice, the highest cost practice for wind. But prescribed grazing and then fence, you can kind of read down through it yourself. But those, so a lot of practices are used. Grazing management is a big part of wind in certain cases. We do have wildlife biologists take a look at each one of those applications to ensure that they are meeting their wildlife friendly practices and they're meeting that objective. So that's a quick look on kind of how that funding went in FY21. A quick snapshot of the source water protection. Again, another a 10% required fund pool allocation for every state. And there again, just funding wise by practice, you can see the most used practice for the source water is irrigation water management practices, as one might suspect. And then modifying sprinkler systems and some micro irrigations and subsurface drip. Those are kind of right there at the top. The cover crops are a big part of that, and so on. So kind of a quick snapshot of where the funds went for source water as well. So moving forward to FY22 in EQIP, again, as I mentioned before, source water, again, it will be required 10% set aside for source water, 10% for wildlife initiative. The historically underserved is 10% total be set aside. We are expecting to see in FY22 the EQIP conservation incentive contracts to come out in another form. As you may recall, in FY21, we were expecting and set up ready to go to roll out EQIP conservation incentive contracts and a sign up, and that was pulled back for some further review and refinement to get some more climate friendly carbon sequestration type of practices included. So that is currently being reviewed at the national and department level to see how that's going to roll out. But by all indications, what we're hearing is there will be an application to sign up in FY22, possibly as soon as the first quarter. This could be this fall, but more to come on that. And there was some talk about having mandated set aside or for the conservation incentive contracts. So really, there's no decision on that either. So that's kind of to be determined. But I would expect that there will be a sign up in FY22 for conservation incentive contracts. And then by statute, livestock requirement is 50%. So 50% of the EQIP funds must go to livestock related practices. Here in Nebraska, of course, with all of our grazing lands, 50% of the state and in grasslands, that is never an issue, but it does make a difference on how we set up our ranking tools and allocation formulas to ensure that 50% of our funds do go to things like grazing management and range management, animal feeding operations, and those types of practices. Our statewide fund pools, here again, this is where we get a lot of feedback from local work groups. Thank you for that. But these are set up on a statewide basis, and here's what we have for FY22 moving forward. So we're going to bring back a fund pool for soil health demo farms. And you may remember 5 years ago, we rolled these out, and It's a very limited number of demonstration farms that we will fund. And it was very successful when we did it previously, but this is where we get a commitment from a producer to take soil health practices on cropland to a higher level, and then agree to allow us to have field days, do some research, get some data, and use those as demonstrations. So we're going to put a small amount of money toward that this year and go back out with try to get some applications for that. And we're looking at only 6 or 7 contracts at the end of the day that we can spread across the state and just use for soil health demonstration purposes. So that's new this year. We're bringing it back. The Nebraska Great Plains Grassland Initiative is a new initiative for this year, and you've heard us talk about this in previous state tech meetings, and we'll be talking more about that here today as well. Then the Working Lands for Wildlife and the Sandhills, you'll hear more about that. We'll continue that in FY22. Like I say, Ryan Lodge will be giving us an update on that in a little bit. And then seasonal high tunnel, the organic, the energy, conservation activity plans, animal feeding operations have been state initiatives for some time, and we plan to continue with those again in the future. The CAP plans, I mentioned those just briefly, and it's just a huge advantage for a producer to use a technical service provider to get those plans done up front, where maybe NRCS staff or partner staff just don't have the capacity to get those plans done and ahead of time. The disaster, well, that will continue again for FY22, and a little bit of a reminder on the disaster fund pool. We now are required to set aside some funds for potential disasters moving forward, with the intent that if we could request additional funds if we have fires, droughts, floods, that kind of thing. But the requirement is now that a state will match what we receive from headquarters, the national. So if we had a disaster that we estimate would take $500,000 that we would request, we would have to match that with our own $500,000. So that is a fund pool that we will have to set up. But as far as allocations, there again, we can make some estimations up front on what we want to put into these different fund pools. And at this point, of course, we don't know what our allocation is going to be for FY22. I do expect that we will get an allocation earlier than later in the fiscal year. But last year that was a little over 26 million, as a reminder, that we had in Nebraska. But whatever that is, the historically underserved pool will be 10% of that. The source water protection will set aside 10% in source water protection. And the wildlife initiative, again, that's 10% requirement. And talk a little bit more about the Nebraska Great Plains Grassland Initiative. There's a lot of similar benefits with the practices and the resource concerns here, that as we roll out the Nebraska Great Plains Grassland Initiative this year, we're going to begin with $1.2 million set aside into that. And we're going to use funds from the wildlife initiative so it's not off the top, it's part of the 10% wildlife initiative. So as I mentioned before, we really have not we struggled to get enough applications to use our 10% in the wildlife initiative. This will assist us in getting that 10% and be mutually beneficial, we hope. So depending on what our initial general allocation is, 10% will go in the wildlife initiative, and 1.2 million will come.
Brad, can you hear me? I think you got your mute. There you go.
Yeah, I just noticed that for some reason. I don't know why that happened, but okay. So anyway, that's that. EQIP CIC. I mentioned before that we don't know if there's going to be a required set aside for EQIP CIC, so that's to be determined. The soil health demo farms, we're going to take $300,000 to put into that this year, and that should fund about 7 of those contracts. The AFOs, $1 million is what we've been at for the last several years. That's where we start to try to assist with those. Disaster, we will start with $1 million in there. And this year, we got through FY21 without declaring any disasters for EQIP. You know, thankfully, right at the end, we did have some wildfires that we were considering, and we'll consider in FY22. So we're setting aside $1 million there as match for any disasters, or if it isn't a disaster that we can meet the national criteria, basically for practices that they would like to have those contracted and applied and paid within about a 90-day time frame. So that doesn't fit all of our practices, but so anyway, this is about where we're going to start with $1 million in the disaster, and then we'll just see how the year plays out, whether we need it or not. If we don't need it for disaster, then we will redistribute that back to the other fund pools. The CAP plans, 200,000, working lands for wildlife, 100,000, and that's for the Sand Hills Working Lands for Wildlife project. That's where we've been at for some time. And high tunnels, organic, tribal, and energy is those are the same levels that we started FY21 that we plan to move into FY22 on. There's also the partnership fund pools, as we classify those, the NWQI, Water Smart, and the Joint Chiefs projects will continue into FY22. And I think Tammy will expand on those a little bit more when she comes up. So in FY22, our application cutoff deadline for all the fund pools is November 19th, and that matches the CSP application cutoff date. There could always be, we're going to try to match up our other initiatives and fund pools with November 19th, but there could be some instances, and I'll take EQIP CIC as one example, that if that gets rolled out late, then that would have a separate application cutoff date. And there could be some potential other application cutoff dates. Soil health demo most likely will have a cutoff date after November 19th. Some of this is yet to be decided. But November 19th for EQIP and CSP is going to be our application cutoff date. And again, remind everybody that it's a continuous sign up, so don't wait. And I'll just want to touch real quick again on source water protection. And here's the map of our priority areas for source water protection. I don't know why the legend didn't come through, but it didn't on this slide. So source water protection, 10% of our funds go towards this initiative. The red squares are our high priority areas. Those are our wellhead protection areas within within the state. The crosshatched areas are medium priority. Those are water quantity management areas. And then the yellow areas are the phase 2 through 4 groundwater management areas out there in the state. So we do plan to pull together a subcommittee meeting here in the next couple weeks. We will be contacting the subcommittee members who are on board when we develop these areas and have a quick overview to just make sure that there aren't any adjustments that we want to make to this map moving forward in FY22. But as I mentioned before, it seems to be working well. We're getting good applications and a good cross section of practices and applications. So just a heads up to some of the committee members there that we'll be making contact soon to see if there's any changes. And a quick reminder that there is a practice list which is eligible. This is unchanged from FY22. We are able to increase payment percentages on some practices. And again, this is just strictly review the same practices as we had in 21. We're planning to move forward into FY22 with. So, but any comments, just get those back to us soon if you could. Real quick on the high priority practices. Again, just want to run this past you again. Every state is allowed to select up to 10 practices. We can give increased payment rates. And these are supposed to be practices which are underutilized that we think are important for impairments for excessive nutrients and ground and surface water drought mitigation, those types of things. So we have selected 10 practices. We include 10 practices as our high priority practices, and these are unchanged as well going into FY22. We had a little bit of discussion about a couple practices, but at the end of the day, we decided to stick with these 10. A quick plug for the local work groups. Again, we intend to do local work group meetings again for FY22. We get some fantastic feedback from that, and we do make changes as a result of what we get back from them. And just for planning purposes, again, we will have at least the initial local work group meetings in January, February timeframe. Again, the most helpful topics, we need to know what your priority resource concerns are, fund pools, your ranking tools. All of that is good feedback, and especially the practice payment schedule feedback we get. Are we offering the right practices? Are we making payments which are incentivizing practices? Are we too high, too low? That is all good feedback. And then any other local issues. And so that's just not like I say, get that on your calendars for FY22, and then a reminder that these local work groups, we're not looking for feedback from only for EQIP practices, but we'd also like feedback on CSP easements, any other issues that you have going on. So that's all good to have that feedback. So that's all I have for the time being. So I'll just stop a second and see if there's any comments before we move on with the agenda. Hey, Andy, see your hands up.
Brad, thanks for the great overview. Just a quick question on the wind fund pool. I think that's a great idea for maximizing opportunities for the brush management. Just a question on the 657 practice with we have the watershed restoration initiative in the Rainwater Basin. We've gotten a lot more interest in the last couple of years for filling those pits that are in the watersheds and directly contribute to the functionality of those wetlands. Would they qualify under that source water if it's in those orange areas? It's traditionally just been a wind funded practice, but I was just curious about, does that fit under the high priority? and other fun pools that you talked about?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Andy. So the high priority practices are eligible for any of the local fun pools or any of the initiatives, unless we specifically restricted some practices from a special initiative. But yeah, the high priority practices, those are intent. Those can be used for any of the fun pools that we set up a cost list for. And so yeah, so if that's, if it fits the WIN practice list, there's 16 practices which ring the bell for WIN, and then so if any of those practices are used in any of one of our fun pools, those count towards the wildlife initiative, the wildlife friendly practices. And then any of the additional practices that we establish that we make eligible for the WIN fund pool itself, all of those funds count towards our 10%. So I feel like I kind of talked around it there a little bit, Andy. Did I hit it all on your question?
No, I think you did. It's just trying to understand if we ran out of the wind fund pool for some of those wetland restoration type practices, if we might be able to tap into some of those other elements of EQIP for a 657, since it's identified as a high priority and source water quality. So I'm probably I probably just need to sit down with you and get my head squared on EQIP.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it would, Andy. Yeah, so. Okay, George.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Yeah, sorry about that. I probably hear some mowing in the background. It's my neighbor. Looking at the source water protection practice summary, it appears that a lot of the effort has been focused on quantity rather than quality issues with source water protection. How can we sort of even that out for at least next year or the years to come, the way I'm interpreting what you put up?
Well, I'll take a shot, and then I'll welcome others to comment as well. Maybe Brett, if you want to hop in here. But in Nebraska, is, as you know, the source water is primarily underground sources. Very little of our drinking water is from surface water sources. So any of those practices that we can use to keep nitrates and chemicals out from leaching into our groundwater count. And so irrigation water management, yeah, it's quantity related, obviously, for sure. But if we can use some irrigation water management to prevent runoff and leaching and deeply, then that would help with the water quality as well. And let's try to keep some of that away from our wellhead protection. So I don't know, Britt or anybody, are there any other want to add to what I just said?
Brad and George, this is Britt Weiser. So I didn't see it, Brad, if you showed a slide of the amount of money going to the different practices. I may have been clicking off a few emails and didn't see that. But if you're saying that your irrigation type practices, whether it be sprinkler, whether it be irrigation water management, is in there, you're absolutely right, Brad, that has an impact not only on water quantity, but a big impact on the leaching. As we know, excessive precipitation or excessive irrigation is what will push those nitrates out of the root zone down into the groundwater. So I don't know, George, if you had any more to follow up on that than that, but yeah, the irrigation practices would fit both sides of the water issue.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Brett. And then just to follow up with Brett, yeah, so the irrigation water management was was top of the list as far as what was funded for source water, then sprinkler systems and subsurface drip. And cover crops is right at the top of the list as well for that. So, okay, anything else before we move on? George, I see your hand still up. I assume you just didn't click on it to take it down, or did you have it? Okay. All right. Well, we'll just go ahead and move on then, and I'll just turn this over to Neil Dominy. Neil, if you're ready, and your group to talk about the Nebraska Great Plains Grassland Initiative update. If you're ready, then take it over.
Hey, Brad, was Tammy gonna give an update before us?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Tammy. Yeah, so Tammy Timms is going to provide an update on the initiative. I'm sorry, Tammy. Good.
That's quite all right, Brad.
So go ahead, Tammy.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I should be sharing my PowerPoint screen for RCPP. I see you're nodding your head, Brad. Thank you. So just a quick update of where we're sitting right now with several of our initiative projects. So I'm just going to start off with RCPP. We have, and I presented this at the last staff meeting too, is that we've got RCPP projects that fall under the Farm Bill 14 rules. And then now we are getting some new RCPP projects that fall under the Farm Bill 18 rules. And what we're finding is there's significant difference between the processes and some of the rules and policy between the two as well. But just to start off, under the 2014 Farm Bill RCPP, we had the Ogallala Aquifer and Platte River Recovery RCPP Project 296, and that our lead partner on that one was Central Platte NRD. Started in 2015, and we actually have completed and closed that project. That it expired back in May 31st. So see there, we had over 64 contracts with producers with great results as far as putting practices on the ground, ranging from irrigation land to converting it to dry land. You can see we have sprinklers and pipelines, irrigation water management, nutrient management. So a very successful RCPP project. And we would just like to take the time to thank the Central Platte NRD and all your partners that were involved in that project to make it so successful. The Cropland Cover and Soil Health and Wildlife Project, the lead partner on that one was the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. That agreement started in 2016. And this one did expire last December, and it's completely closed out. And again, you know, a very successful project, over 72 Protrax contracts with producers with around 7,000 acres of cover crops with some access control as well. And again, huge thanks for making that such a success to Nebraska Game and Parks Commission and your partners. The Republican Basin Conservation Partnership Project number 1452. That was an agreement that started in 2016. The Lower Republican NRD with partnership with Middle Republican, Upper Republican, and NASSIS. That one expired August 8th. So again, that one is completed and done. Another very successful project is we had at least 100 Protrax contracts with producers, and a great job of getting practices on the ground with those producers. We have 2 watershed RCPP projects right now. The Wahoo Creek Water Quality Sites 26 and 27, and then the Papillion Creek Site dam number 1712 project. And both projects are underway. We're working on the watershed plans and designs and constructions on those watershed projects. The Wahoo Creek watershed is with the Lower Platte North NRD, and then the Papillions with the Papio Missouri River NRD. And looks like we are probably going to end up extending the Wahoo Creek water quality RCPP projects to give us a little more time to get that project on the ground. Currently, the Papillion Creek one will be set to expire in a couple of years, so we've got a little bit of time. Divots and the pivots. Project number 1564 is one that we have with the Upper Big Blue NRD, working in connection with the Rainwater Basin joint venture, Valmont Irrigation, and all the other partners listed here. This was a good agreement that started in 2017 and set to expire next September. You see the goal there is to restore wetlands by enrolling ASEP and ALE and ASEP WRE ground in $1.1 million, and then upgrading irrigation systems to VRI with EQIP. So currently, we have 4 ASEP ALEs closed, and well, 5 parcels closed, and then on the WRE side, we've got 2 agreements with 1 parcel closed, so we've got 1 more to go. And as far as the EQIP side of that project, currently have 6 EQIP contracts, and we'll have 1 more hopefully this fall or next spring. So now we get to the Farm Bill 18 RCPP projects. The Resilient Futures for Nebraska Soils, project number 1966. That is a agreement that we have with the Nature Conservancy, and we're working with Cargill McDonald, our partners as well as the Upper Big Blue NRD and Central Platte NRD. It's been a lot of fun working with this one and meeting with the partners and planning out how this is going to work. Again, as earlier I'd mentioned, RCPP Farm Bill 18 has changed a lot as far as how it works compared to Farm Bill 14. Our Farm Bill 14 projects all ran through are basically under EQIP funding. Well, it was in a pool under the EQIP, and then we just ran it basically like we do EQIP. Well, with these, we actually are not going to be using the same software system that we used for the Farm Bill 14. We're going to be using Conservation Desktop, which is our software system for planning, but is now also being converted over to being a contracting software. So, but we've done a lot of work. We had the agreement signed in April, and we're working on the supplemental agreement. The supplemental agreement is the mechanism that we use for reimbursements. So this one will have some partner technical assistance dollars, and so we'll have the supplemental agreement will be what we use again as that reimbursement. So that one is set to expire in 2025. We're hoping to have great turnout on this one. We have so far this year, we are going to obligate some contracts in fiscal year 21. As I mentioned, Conservation Desktop is now our contracting tool, currently under development. It's been taking a little while through the summer, but it's coming along. And we hope to have 23 of the 37 applications that we had gotten from producers funded, obligated by the end of this month. So we're going to be using roughly around $700,000 of the 3.1 million FA. And I just wanted to take a note on here too that because of the partner efforts, this is just kind of a fun thing to have noted, was that because of the partner efforts, you know, Upper Big Blue NRD and Central Platte NRD did a lot of outreach to producers and recruitment, and almost 50% of our applications or applicants that are looking at being obligated are new clients to NRCS. So that's kind of an exciting thing to see happen. Just a quick note on their goals is to enroll 100,000 acres over 5 years, store carbon over 150,000 metric tons, and then of course soil erosion, and then link producers to carbon credits through the ESMC project. And the 3 practices that we are using for obligating or for the contracts are going to be 328 crop rotation, 329 no-till, and 340 cover crop. The eligibility requirements for Farm Bill 18 RCPP, just as in the past, has been that all producers meet Farm Bill 18 eligibility or Farm Bill eligibility. So we have to do all of the farm tract eligibility, wetland eligibility, and all that on all of these producers. We have a renewal with the cropland cover for soil health and wildlife. I'd mentioned earlier that this one was closed, but because it was so successful, we do have it up and running again for another 5 years. We signed the partnership agreement in January, and the supplemental agreement as far as reimbursement for the partner TA side of things is undergoing this like signature process. This one is going to go for 5 years, so it'll expire probably 2026 instead of 2025. And we're hoping to get some signups and enrollment recruitment and all that going on this fall for this project. So the goal remains to plant another 7,000 acres of multi-species cover crop, allowing grazing to maximize the area 75%, leaving 25% residue for wildlife. And the practices for that one will be 340 cover crops and 472 access control. The Ogallala Aquifer and Platte River Recovery, again, this is another one because it was so successful in the past. It met the criteria to be a renewal. So it was funded again at the $2.7 million threshold. The lead partner on that one is Central Platte NRD, but several partners involved with this project as well. And with this one, again, we're working on finishing up the agreement and hope to have signups begin this fall as well. The Nebraska Forest Restoration Partnership Project number 2173, that was our very first alternative funding arrangement type RCPP, and where our lead partner will be the one to basically manage and administer the financial assistance side of the project. So they're going to be doing a lot of management of the FA and a lot of the management of the technical assistance with our involvement as well. So this whole project is $4.5 million. And that's in partnership with 16 NRDs currently, and Nebraska Game Parks Commission, landowner contributions, but our lead partner, the Nebraska Forest Service, has been working with us diligently on completing the agreement and all of the details that that's going to require. The goals of this project are to restore 5% oak cottonwood forest, renovate 5% declining windbreaks, recover 10% lost windbreaks, and then just overall increase landowners' knowledge of tree management. The practices that will be involved in this RCPP project will be forest stand improvement and fence, which the Nebraska Forest Service will be working directly with producers on. And then the windbreak establishment, windbreak renovation, tree shrub site prep, and tree shrub establishment. Those will be handled mostly through the NRDs under the Nebraska Forest Service guidance. And then just a quick map of that area. So it's covering the whole state, and you can see the 16 NRDs. But we did want to note too that if other NRDs that are not in the green area want to participate, we can surely try to work in. So just let us know, and we'll get you in touch with the Nebraska Forest Service as well. The newest RCPP that we have is the Platte and Playa Wetland Protection. And this is through the Ducks Unlimited as our lead partner. We're currently working on negotiating the agreement with them, but we're looking at utilizing $1.3 million total. And they had requested 1.9, but they were stretching the money out across for the nation. And so they reduced down to 1.3, which they were in agreement with. And so we're just reworking the agreement for that. A lot of partners involved in this one, set to expire in 2026. It'll be a 5-year project. The goals are to have 640 acres of entity held easements. There's going to be a restoration easement and then conservation land type easements. They want to do 150 acres of protected wetland and restored wetlands, and they just increased overall the shorebird and waterfowl within 6.2 miles of the easements. So as I mentioned, big changes in producer contracting that we're doing. We used to use the ProTrax contracting system, and we used to call those ProTrax contracts. Now through Conservation Desktop, that's where we're doing all of our planning and all of our contracting, and we call those land management rental contracts, no longer ProTrax contracts, because they have 2 different sets of software. And the software system through Conservation Desktop has been ongoing throughout the summer. And a couple weeks ago, they basically gave us the go-ahead to really start producing our contracts and our agreements through, I should say, land management contracts through Conservation Desktop. And the obligation process isn't going to be as slick as it is in ProTrax. I mean, it's going to get there. But for this year, we have to bundle all of the obligation documents and then basically send them up to national office so that they can obligate those contracts through basically manual method rather than automatically like ProTrax had done. That's just posed a few challenges for us this summer. That's with the RCPP project that we have with the Nature Conservancy. Just a quick note, I had the slide on last one too, but just again showing the difference in the farm bills is we had cooperative agreements and MOUs, well as now we have programmatic partnership agreements, and then reimbursements are done through extra paper called supplemental agreements. The fiscal year 2022 RCPP alternative funding arrangement opportunity, the request for proposals was this past May. And I think nationwide they have around 34 different proposals that had come in. And we're still waiting to hear what selections were. And they have told us the announcements should be coming at the end of this month, if not October. And I should also note too that they'll probably be announcing a classic RCPP sign up at the end of this month as well into October. So keep your ears posted for those announcements to come out. The Voluntary Public Access and Habitat Incentive Program, that is an NRCS program that we have, well, we've awarded that to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. That was last summer, but it's basically what it is to encourage owners and operators of privately held farm, ranch, or forest land to voluntarily make their land available for access to the public to do wildlife dependent recreation, including hunting, fishing, under programs implemented by state or tribal governments. So again, this is a 3-year grant that the Nebraska Game and Parks had gotten. And as of April, they had 234,000 acres opened for public use, 4,280 acres of WRP acres enrolled. So it's very successful so far, and it has been in the past as well through the Open Waters and Field program. Open Fields and Water program, I should say. Currently, we have around 60,000 public access atlases for 2021 that have been published and are being distributed. So I'd like to thank the Nebraska Game and Parks for that publishing too, because I know a lot of people are enjoying that. And if anybody wants a copy of that atlas, let us know. Next, we have the Bureau of Land Reclamation's Water Smart program. And basically, we have our separate EQIP initiative dealing with that. But in a nutshell, the Bureau of Land Reclamation has 6 different Water Smart programs, including the grants, watershed management, water recycling and reuse, desalination, drought response, and basin studies. But then within this Water Smart program, within the grants, there are opportunities for eligible applicants such as irrigation districts to apply for water and energy efficiency grants, small scale water efficiency projects, and water marketing strategy grants. Applicants successful with these opportunities from the Bureau of Land Reclamation are then eligible to apply for funds directly aimed to producers under the EQIP Water Smart initiative. We have 2 NRDs that are involved with this EQIP Water Smart initiative. We have the Middle Republican NRD. In this year, 2021, we had $481,000 obligated into 15 new contracts. That covers 4,726.8 acres. Roughly, we're looking at 6 pumping plants, 10 irrigation systems, around 3,100 acres of irrigation and water management. Our next EQIP Water Smart initiative NRD is the Upper Republican NRD. In 2021, we're looking at $18,000, a little over $18,000 obligated into 1 new contract, and that was for 250.7 acres of cover crop. So anybody needs more information about EQIP Water Smart Initiative, there's a web link to that. The National Water Quality Incentive, NWQI, move into that. So this was established, the NWQI was established in 2012 as an initiative delivered jointly with state water quality agencies and the EPA. In 2017, created the watershed readiness phase, which is now what we call the planning phase, where states could include watersheds in NWQI and receive technical assistance for conservation planning, outreach, and coordination. And then in 2019, the source water protection areas was added. With NWQI or under NWQI, states are required to have 3 watersheds that are under like a HUC 12. That's what the watershed size would be focused on. And it's 4 impaired waters listed under section 303D is what we focused on. We have 4 watersheds. You see here we have the Brazil Creek, Wahoo Creek, Turkey Creek, and then the Big Sandy Creek. Currently, the Wahoo Creek is still under a planning phase. We're really trying to spread some efforts to generate producer interest there. We have staff working with local agencies and co-ops to find ways to reach and generate actionable responses from producers. And our goal is to hopefully move this NWQI watershed from this planning stage into the implementation stage in 2022 for funding in 2023. That's a goal. Otherwise, right now, the Brazil Creek and Turkey Creek and Big Sandy Creek are currently in the implementation phases. So for fiscal year 2021, looking at the allocations that we have, in Brazil Creek, we ended up with 37 contracts for a little over $1 million. Big Sandy, 8 contracts, looking at 100,000, almost 101,000. Turkey Creek, we have 3 contracts at a little over 93,000. So total 48 contracts with about $1.2 million. And if we want to look at the practices that have been accomplished in each one of these watersheds, we look at the Big Sandy area, and this is actually, it says fiscal year 2021 in the chart, but this is 2019 through 2021. Look at the success that we've had on there. Looking at the cover crop, we've got over 1,500 acres of cover crop. That seems to be one of the main tickets. Sprinkler systems, 169.1 acres, $112,000. So a lot of activity, a lot of interest in, well, some interest, I should say. We want to generate a little more interest in the Big Sandy area as well, but we're off to a good start. In the Brazil Creek, we're seeing a lot of action there. Nutrient management on 39,000 acres, $1.3 million. And cover crop, again, that's a popular one. Looked at 34,000 plus acres on, and over $1 million of obligations towards those practices. So a lot of action, a lot of activity, a lot of interest in the Brazil Creek NWQI area. And then lastly, we have Turkey Creek. And we're having just a little bit of slower interest in there. We're hoping to generate more interest as we go, but currently right now we're looking at that one contract has that critical area planning, grass waterways, and some pest management in there as well. Then just a quick note on the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Program. That's a program that's through the U.S. Forest Service and the USDA NRCS. But this is put out nationwide that areas that want to regenerate or have concerns of forested areas, this is the program to look at. So basically for Nebraska, when they applied, the Nebraska State Forester identified that the Pine Ridge Forest lands and the Niobrara Valley in the Sandhills area is a priority for the Nebraska State Forest Strategic Plan. Threats to the areas include increased risk of catastrophic wildfire due to very high and growing fuel loads, chronic drought, and severe weather. Eastern red cedar expansion threatens pine, deciduous woodlands, and grasslands alike out there. So in 2021, we had allocated 508,000, and looks like we have actually what was obligated into contracts was almost 400,000. It is a 3-year project based on 2 priorities: hazardous fuel reduction and then maintaining resilient landscapes. The project itself, NRCS Equip FA, is 1.0 million, and then there's also a 10% technical assistance for $102,000. So in 2021, we had these 5 contracts, and the impact area is 6,588.1 field acres. That included some acres, acres of forest restoration, brush management, woody residue treatment. So again, this has been another project, another program that's been so successful. And when I was looking over all the paperwork and listed all the partners that are involved, it's a huge one, very successful. And again, we thank all of our partners that work with us on this program. Okay, that is all I have, Brad. If there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Are there any questions for Tammy? Just go ahead and unmute or put a message in the chat box. All right, seeing and hearing none. Okay, now, Neil. Apologies to Tammy again. Sorry for this going right over you. But so now, Neil, I'm not sure who's going to take the lead, but Nebraska Great Plains Grassland Initiative update. You go ahead and take it over.
All right, Brad, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, very good. I apologize to the state tech team. I'm actually calling in out on the road here, so I hope I stand somewhat clear to everybody. Just wanted to give a little update to the team about the Nebraska Grassland Grazing Initiative and just some of the background on that quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the team. We've brought this to the State Technical Committee, started about a year ago with Craig Derrickson, looking at how we can better work with woody encroachment on grasslands. And through discussions, we were able to get an agreement with UNL and Professor Drac Twidwell to help lead us on investigating a new strategy for change. And we've effectively done that. And Drac is going to give us just a little bit about some of that strategy for change here in a second. And we're beyond what is that strategy and what does it look like, and now we're to the point of working on implementation. So you're going to hear today from Drac a little bit of an overview or kind of the big picture, and then Jeff Nichols, our state range management specialist, is going to give a little update kind of on the planning training side and some of our changes when it comes to woody encroachment. And then Connor Ward, our state EQIP program manager, is going to give just a bit of an update kind of from the programmatic side. So we have a bit of a 4 or a 5-headed monster on this team. We have a partnership influence or partner influence. We got the ecological sciences, we got programs, and then we have our science strategy leader in Drac. So I will quit talking, and Drac, if you are on, I will pass this on to you and then to Jeff.
Sure, great. Thanks, Neil. I'm going to be just super brief because people on here have heard things before, and I know they want to get to what Connor and Jeff and others have to say on it. I think just coming from the big picture, a lot of this, just as a reminder for everybody, started just with conversations among multiple NRCS state conservationists on really, how do we keep some of our bigger grasslands intact, and really driving home just the threats that's happening in the Great Plains to grasslands. And just there's a huge amount of rising awareness on this issue. Every major grassland conservation group their ears are listening, they're paying attention, and there's just a lot of momentum on thinking bigger about how we conserve grasslands. So it's interesting, this 4-state initiative between state conservationists in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota, and really recognizing that what we're doing with our grasslands isn't working at the scales that and performance level that we want, that's really helped to trigger a big effort. And one of those was what you're seeing on the screen here, this Working Lands for Wildlife biome framework for conservation action. This is now released, it's public. It draws from the principles that, as Neil describes it, is that science for change, and just how to deal with biome level threats. And so just stepping back for everybody, I think it's really important. This is totally unprecedented. We've not had a biome framework for America's grasslands. They don't really exist, on the planet because our biomes have been stable. And so we've tended to manage them like what Tammy was talking about, just in terms of, hey, we have an issue at this location or spot, so let's manage that issue and we'll pump money towards it. So we've just really lacked large-scale conservation planning, and this is a huge leadership step in terms of scaling up, having better and larger vision and goals, and starting to deal with big-scale issues and threats. So a huge, huge step forward. And you can Google this. I've got links, so if you contact me, I'm happy to share it. So I pulled this from actually a Center for Grasslands Roadmap webinar that I had done last week. And what I think is important for this technical committee is just understanding this process of how this is all working. I mean, these larger scale frameworks and strategies is really driving technology needs, and those are being developed as part of different shops around one of them being the Rangeland Analysis Platform that's making sure we have the technology and geospatial information that's needed to meet the goals and missions of these frameworks. And that technology also is being used to help guide implementation. So, you saw today the Nebraska Great Plains Grasslands Initiative branding that Brad put up. That follows the same kind of thing that Kansas has, and Oklahoma has it, and South Dakota is talking, next month. So these implementations is kind of where we're at, and that really comes to better outcomes. So it's not just how much we're spending or how many acres we're treating. We'll be able to quantify the improved benefits to the state of Nebraska, the people in Nebraska, relative to our grasslands, and that drives further guidance in these frameworks. And so this has been a really rapid iteration relative to how we normally work. And just science is well positioned to have the back of you all in this kind of partnership as this moves forward. In terms of that broad framework, there are two large-scale threats to the Great Plains grasslands related to how we manage vegetation. Most people know the long history of agricultural-based land use conversion, and that's what you're seeing with this middle map. This is actually from colleagues over at WWF. And basically, right, like everywhere with low cultivation hasn't been plowed, hasn't been hit by the tractor. And so what you see are this scattered network of grasslands, things like CRP that are in high cultivation zones. So 70% of grasslands have been cultivated. They're at moderate to high risk. So most of your big intact ones are tied to low cultivation risk, as you'd expect. And of course, you look at the southern half of the Great Plains, look at all those low cultivation risk. What you have is woody encroachment in those areas. And so basically, throughout the Great Plains, our most intact areas are increasingly at risk to woodland expansion and woody encroachment. And the data for the biome shows now that they're occurring at the same rate. So the rate of land use conversion is now matched by the rate of woody encroachment. That's why they're the two biome scale threats for us here. Different biomes have different biome scale threats, but these are the two. Everything else tends to be a more localized resource concern. So if we're not preparing for these two things, right, what we do with other practices doesn't matter long-term because we usually get caught up by one of the larger scale threats in the system. So really important to make sure that we're prepared for this kind of scale of issue and threat. And that's really what that biome framework's meant to address. And we have so many other groups that are buying on, again, tied to grassland conservation, of how to address these better and move forward. So that's really part of that huge big picture. What I think is great is that with that kind of framework and those technologies, when it came to implementation, the Great Plains immediately overnight with NRCS state leadership said, hey, we're gonna commit 10 million acres to this priority. And and to see that happen so rapidly was really amazing. Now, 92% of those acres come from the 4-state initiative. So it tells you how important it is to state conservationists and the NRCS, and just understanding more and more about these issues in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota. 92% of that 10 million acres is from those areas. And it's also because we showed how to increase our ability to win with woody encroachment, and how to start to manage more acres cheaper and get ahead of the issue. So there's a lot of additional technical stuff that we'll be able to dive into long term. But I just think that initial commitment of 10 million, it's not what can we do? You know, NRCS responded overnight with it, and increasingly looking for partners to, you know, jump onto that kind of bandwagon. Where I'll end you with is just this science of change. So there's a lot of discussions about training and education and getting the word out for many different groups. The quote I always like to say is that I was approached a few years ago by a leader in the NRCS, and they said, "Look, Drac, like a lot of other ecologists, you've done a great job of showing why we're failing in our grasslands and in our rangelands, but I can't build programs around, you know, failure. We need solutions." And that just really struck home with me. Ecologists do a great job of studying mechanisms and the consequences of changes through different systems. But we don't always do as good of a job of, say, some engineers or agriculturalists in terms of solutions-oriented research. So that really drove us for a couple years. And we have those solutions. We have a better way of winning on woody encroachment that everyone can get behind. And so that's coming out as part of multi-state extension guidance throughout the Great Plains. Pretty much every land grant institution, there's extension faculty and buy-in on this, which is very rare. And the reason for that is because it's just recognized, once we had those solutions in place, just recognize how much better of a process this was than just going out and cutting down some trees. So it really revolves around reducing risk and vulnerability, and really driving home what makes our grasslands resilient, what keeps them intact, and what keeps those outcomes tied to implementation where we want them. So I know there will be a lot more on this, and there will be a lot more training and education tied to what we now know. That's a big priority of ours in the fall. But I know that most today you all probably want to talk about implementation of money, so I'm going to keep it there for now. I too have to step out. Unfortunately, I've got an appointment that I have to drive to. So like Neil, I apologize for having to leave early, but yeah, I really appreciate the efforts of people on this technical committee and your all's leadership in this area. So thanks for letting me provide an intro today.
Thanks, Direct, for doing that. And Jeff, while you pull up what you're going to show to the group today, I was remiss in introductions. I forgot to mention Rich Nelson, our state biologist, state forester. He's been an instrumental part of putting this together as well. So if he's on, he'll probably help us with any FAQs we do come up with. Jeff, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Are you seeing my screen? Somebody would let me know.
Looks good.
Okay. This afternoon, I want to talk to you about the new initiative that Nebraska is doing that others have mentioned here so far, called the Nebraska Great Plains Grassland Initiative. Yes, first I should introduce myself. I'm new to this committee. I haven't been on one of these calls before. Just new to the state range management specialist position here in Nebraska as of a couple months ago. So I'm glad to be able to sit in on this meeting today and provide you a little information of what we have going so far on this initiative. So this Nebraska State Great Plains Grassland Initiative, this is a new framework for addressing the woody encroachment on our grazing lands. And I recognize, you know, there are some groups within the state, some organizations that have been doing pieces or components of this strategy for, 3 to 5 years now. But what we're working towards is trying to get this as a wholesale strategy that is accepted and utilized for all of the groups that are trying to work together in partnerships, and then and certainly across the way that we are approaching things from NRCS's planning and contracting and programming standpoint. So this initiative is it's landowner driven, in that landowners have called for coming up with better method of doing this woody encroachment treatment on rangelands in a way that would allow more progress and more retainage of the progress that is made. And then, but there is a lot of informing of landowners that needs to be done as we move ahead with this. And so it's going to be a work in progress, and there's definitely going to be a lot of information that needs shared. It is science informed, and as Drock has nicely laid out here just ahead of me, he's been the impetus, he and his team, for getting this process underway. And then, of course, NRCS has bought into this, and it is agency supported, and is and will be a priority for NRCS moving forward. So the whole idea of this initiative is to manage for the situation that you see on your left, outlined in green, and that is, wide open grasslands, prairie ecosystems, with all the ecosystem functions in place, such as watershed, hydrologic function, great places for wildlife habitats of all species that love these grasslands. And then probably most of all, and most importantly to the state of Nebraska, is to maintain this vital resource as the source of the economic engine for our state, which is beef cattle industry. And so we want to try to step things up and do a better job to maintain and manage the grasslands that we still have that are not encroached by woody vegetation, and keep those in that state. And we want to avoid the situation that we have here on the right, outlined in the red, so that we are not managing just small remnants of prairie vegetation in amongst a woody encroached landscape. We've all seen this situation unfold over the last 3 to 5 decades in our state in certain locations, where we had an open grassland landscape, and we've made a transition, a state transition, over to a wooded state. And the ball and cup diagram there that you see in the lower left-hand corner illustrates this very well. When you're in a grassland state, you can move back and forth within that state and change the vegetative plant community with the different practices that you implement in grazing, grazing strategies, and also through drought and different things like that. But once you get woody encroachment that comes onto those grasslands, and it tips that ball up over that hump to the right, and we get down into that woodland state, it becomes very expensive and difficult to move that ball back over into a grassland state. And these areas that are encroached in Nebraska across the state to this level, when we're doing work in these areas, it's oftentimes exceeding the value of the land to be able to restore these. And so once this restoration is complete, the problem with it is it still remains highly vulnerable to this encroachment process, or being re-encroached and reinfested. And so this is one of the things that we want to avoid. So this slide here kind of demonstrates that, and it's these 3 pictures on the right would demonstrate a typical brush management scenario that NRCS may have employed. This happens to be a project that I was personally involved with in the field office out here near North Platte, or in Lincoln County. But you see this same scenario unfolding or play out time and time again across the state wherever this woody encroachment issue is in play. But basically, you know, I had a client come in 2010, started doing some treatment on his own on this lower portion of this slope, realized how expensive that was to do this brush management, came in, applied for EQIP. He got an EQIP contract and right away, you know, finished up the brush management, cedar tree cutting on the areas that were accessible with the wheeled equipment. And so in 2011, we had those trees cleaned off. Well, by 2021 or 10 years later, you can see what that same area looks like. And basically the trees are coming in every bit as thick or thicker than they were before. And this is after at least 1 or 2 mowing events in that time frame from 2011 to 2021 over that 10-year period. So those little seedlings were clipped off at least once, if not twice, within there. So what we're wanting to look at then is this new approach where we don't keep spending money on these same acres and having the same problem reoccur through our programs. We want to change our approach and look at the way through this risk and vulnerability model that is being outlined in this guide that Drock pointed out there. And when we do this, we're first things we want to look at are the sensitivity of the site. You know, is it a site that is vulnerable to a site that could be encroached with woody vegetation? And then we look at the exposure. Is there seed supply nearby that is going to provide a seed source for this encroachment on this grassland or rangeland? And from those two things, you assess what your risk level is. And so if we look over at this example on the right, obviously the woody encroachment was already there. And had we looked at this and looked at the potential for re-encroachment because there's still trees nearby that are seed producers, we would say that our risk level was pretty high for re-encroachment. The other thing we look at along with the risk then is adaptive capacity. Is this landowner, is he able to take action to keep things from getting re-encroached or retreat these areas? Or, you know, once they're cleaned up, are they going to be able to employ practices such as prescribed fire or something like that that's going to keep this area clean? In this instance, this producer, you know, his capacity was to be able to clip those trees again. But obviously, that's not going to be a long-term solution. It's going to have to be something that's completely ongoing. So prescribed fire might be something that would work or that we would have suggested here, but it's such a situation we could not get a prescribed fire burn unit in place on this particular tract yet. But when you put the risk and adaptive capacity together, then that will tell you what your vulnerability of this site is for re-encroachment or woody encroachment. This slide is showing the areas that we want to look at trying to do a better job of maintaining intact grasslands or catching them while they're in the early dispersal and recruitment stage. And so this is kind of where we hope to be going with this guide and this new framework for working on these areas, is trying to defend these areas that are still intact and not spend a whole lot of time and money on the areas that are already transitioned and those that are in expansion. So naturally, we're still going to be doing some work in those areas because we'll be working on the edges of intact grasslands. But for the most part, make any significant progress, we want to defend the core areas that are already intact or in those early stages. So we've got a lot of tools available that we're going to be utilizing or capitalizing on as we go through this process. First one is this guide to reducing risk and vulnerability that I've just discussed. There's a lot more to it than what I briefly mentioned there, but that gives you the general idea. We're going to need to be providing training not only to NRCS folks, but our partners, and we're working in conjunction with them. I mean, they're going to be teaching us things We'll be teaching them things, but also, working with our NRCS employees to deliver this uniformly across the state, or to change their approach of the areas that we're working on. It's going to consist of formal and self-development programs. We're starting to do some things through EQIP that Brad will be talking about or Connor will be talking about in just a few minutes. But there's federal and then state programs, local programs, grant dollars, partner dollars, all kinds of different things that we're going to be looking at in terms of pooling these programs together to try to get this initiative off the ground. Working with partners is going to be critically important. There's a lot of people that have a vested interest in being successful here, all the way from the beef cattle industry to the wildlife organizations to NRCS and everybody else. So we'll all hopefully be working together towards one successful end here. Landowner associations, prescribed burn associations made up of the landowners. Ultimately, private landowners are the ones that are going to need to be implementing this and putting it on the ground. And so we want to do everything we can to promote and encourage and enable and facilitate private landowner associations to tackle this problem on a landscape scale, or at least on neighborhood scales, and not just looking at their own individual small units. So we want to get this on a broader scale. And then utilizing technology such as the rangeland analysis platform, rangeland brush estimation tool, and NRCS business tools. So one of the greatest tools that we're going to probably have so that we can have a meaningful impact and be able to impact large enough number of acres to be significant will be prescribed fire or prescribed burning. And so we need to work hard to increase the acceptance of this practice among landowners, get that cultural will out there of acceptance of prescribed fire as an ecological tool that is a natural part of these grassland plant communities. We want people to be more willing to accept that and to utilize this tool. And so we're going to be promoting the landowner prescribed burn associations, and of course evaluating the dollars and incentives that we provide through our programs to do this, and then working with our NRCS employees in training and getting their job approval to the place where they can effectively deliver this to the private landowners. And then our partners are be essentially critically important in this process. So that's just in a nutshell where we're headed with this Nebraska grassland initiative, and I hope that that will give you just a brief overview, I guess, of where we're headed. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I think we'll go ahead, and Connor, why don't you go ahead and pull up your material, and we'll kind of just keep cruising, and then we'll take questions when Connor finishes up here.
All right, you bet, Neil. Can everybody see my screen okay? It was taking a minute to load there.
I can see it now, Connor.
All right, great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Connor Ward. I'm the EQIP program manager. And really my role with this new initiative and this new approach, as far as right now, has been to just kind of capture everything and understand the priorities and where we're headed with it so that we can get this into an initiative. Sorry, I had some feedback there. Okay. Roll this into an initiative and ultimately a EQIP ranking pool or ranking tool that captures these priorities, this concept of defending the core and whatnot. So my presentation is pretty short here, but this first slide here is to give you a visual representation of the areas that will be applicable and eligible for this Great Plains Grassland Initiative. As you can see, it's this area up here in the northeast, Verdigris Brazil, Sand Hills, Lusk Canyons, and the southwestern mixed grass prairies. As Brad alluded to earlier, the plan to fund this initiative through EQIP right now is to utilize about half of our wind funds, or that 10% that we need to allocate towards wildlife, and kind of lumping that in with wind and utilizing half of those funds. And as I stated, right now, to-do items or next steps, we've, like I said, gotten some of these layers for the applicability areas. And we'll be throwing these layers into CART, which is our tool used to assess and rank all of our EQIP pools and other program pools across the state. So when I say layers, I'm speaking of these 4 areas within the state here that will be eligible for the initiative. And then not only those types of layers, but the woody transition, those 4 different areas or levels of brush management that Jeff spoke to earlier. Duroc and his team have developed a layer to help us kind of pinpoint where those areas are within the landscape, section by section. So we'll be using tools like that and incorporating those into our tools as well. Moving forward, just encourage any discussion for this initiative and these types of new priorities and approaches. They pertain to brush management within your local working groups, and discussing priorities within those. And as I said, we're still identifying some of those conservation practices that will be used for the different payment scenarios through EQIP as well. I just want to throw a plug in for RCPP that Tammy spoke to earlier, to promote this initiative and this concept going forward, for additional funding opportunities through RCPP and programs like CIG, Conservation Innovation Grants. Just encourage everybody to start looking at programs like that to supply additional funding for this effort. And if there's any questions with those programs and what we can possibly achieve through those, just feel free to let Brad or Tammy and I know, and we can assist with that. So with that, that's kind of where we're at with the, as far as programs goes for this initiative. Still building on it, and ultimately in the end, we'll have a tool, ranking tool, developed for fiscal year 2022 to kick this thing off, and that can be fine-tuned and edited as needed going forward, always. So with that, Neil, that's all I had.
All right, thanks, Connor, for that. Brad, I cannot see the Q&A chat pod, so if there's anything in there, please let us know. How about questions? We have questions from the group on where we're headed with the Great Plains Grassland Initiative. As you all can tell, we're definitely the first year out on this, so we are learning as we go, and we kind of opening the doors to all of our partners and landowners to help us along the route. So any questions for the team?
Okay, Neil, I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet. So if anybody wants to unmute and ask a verbal, then go ahead.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Like I said, I apologize if my connection wasn't the best today. I was out on a partner field day up in the Brazil area, but I sure wanted to be part of this call, and I appreciate everybody listening in. And if you have further questions, please feel free to reach out to anybody that Jeff, Connor, Rich Nelson, myself. We're more than happy to entertain questions and help provide direction. So thank you very much for everybody's time.
Okay, thanks, Neil and Jeff and Connor. Very good. And like Neil said, go ahead and feel free to submit any comments or questions even after the meeting. So with that, we're ready for Working Lands for Wildlife, the Sandhills project. Ryan Lodge, are you ready to take over and give us an update there?
I am. Let me share my screen here.
Okay, thanks.
Can everybody see my presentation?
It's, yep, I can see it.
Okay. Is it in present mode, or because it doesn't look like that on my end?
Yeah, it looks like it is.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a pretty good segue. This Working Lands for Wildlife initiative has been around for 5 years, and it really, a lot of the stuff we do with this initiative meets the goals and objectives of the new Great Plains Grassland Initiative. So many of you are familiar with this Working Lands for Wildlife initiative that we have in the Eastern Sandhills, and some of you may not be as familiar with it. So a couple things I'm going to be doing is just kind of give you a little bit of background of the program and what our objectives are and what we're targeting, and then go over some of the results that we've achieved over the last 5 years. As I mentioned, this program was developed back in 2017, 5 years ago, through a partnership that was a proposal that was submitted by the Nebraska Cattlemen. This program is administered through NRCS through the EQIP program. You saw some of the numbers that Brad gave earlier of what we get allocated and some of the results we had from this last sign up. But basically, this initiative is targeting on at-risk species or threatened and endangered species, something we feel that's very important. And for Nebraska, our two main species that we were looking at were greater prairie chickens and American burying beetles. Having said that, there's also going to be a whole suite of other species that benefit from some of the work that we do. The greater prairie chicken primarily occur in the eastern sandhills, and then we have another grouse species, the sharp-tailed grouse, that's more in the western end of the sandhills, although we do have some populations over this way. Why do we care about prairie chickens? They're an indicator of a healthy grassland. Some of the threats that are going on is the conversion of prairies, fragmentation of grasslands, and those have caused declines for those particular species. It's a at-risk species here in Nebraska under the legacy plan. And I don't know if you can see that map very well, but 3/4 of the population only occurs in 3 of the 17 states of its historic range. So you can see that their habitats are declining for a number of reasons, and conversion of prairie and fragmentation are two big ones. So just a little bit about what they like. They're a resident species. They have a large home range. They want open, expensive grasslands, and they don't like trees. If a landscape starts to be encroached with 5% tree cover, or even sometimes down to 3%, the birds stop using those areas, or will start to move off those areas. Very low cropland you want to have in their home range, and then focus on trying to develop quality nesting cover. Some other species that we may not think about as much or are familiar with are also called the sandhills home, and so they share the same habitat, and some of these same threats I'm talking about also hurt their populations and their habitat range. Two big threats that we face is the big one that we talked about is eastern red cedar encroachment, and because of the lack of fire, we're seeing more and more of these grasslands being encroached by trees. And then another thing is just healthy grassland management. Areas that tend to get grazed a little harder than they probably should will take away that quality habitat, that nesting habitat that chickens need. And so and then the other thing is our other invasive species like leafy spurge, which is a noxious weed, or smooth brome, Kentucky bluegrass, stuff like that can also suppress the structure and the function of these grasslands that we want to see. So getting into what Working Lands for Wildlife is we're targeting a 10-county area in the eastern sandhills to work with ranchers. We want to address resource concerns and restore the habitats that are going to benefit these species that I'm talking about. The practices that we work with landowners or with ranchers is to mechanically remove eastern red cedar trees, provide infrastructure to modify a grazing system, or the adoption of a new grazing system. And then also we want to integrate prescribed burning when and where it's needed. And as a result, these are working lands. So the stuff that we're wanting to do out here, that have to make sense to the rancher, because they're the ones that's their livelihood. And so we want to make sure that these projects, these ranches, become economically viable and sustainable for them. But we also want to contain these diverse native grasslands that's going to provide the necessary habitat that we want. We, as I mentioned, the NRCS is the agency that administers this program, but we have a whole suite of partners in the Eastern Sandhills that help make this program hugely successful. Nebraska Cattlemen submitted that proposal, but the other partners you see on the screen have provided both financial assistance and technical assistance. And what's really great about the partners is that they can provide more dollars to help spread our EQIP dollars out further, but also with them requiring, longer term agreements, we can see longer lasting benefits of the work that we're doing out there. Here just shows a map of Nebraska, and you can see where the sandhills lie, and then those shaded counties are the counties that are eligible for this program. So you have Brown, Rock, Holt, Antelope, Boone, Greeley, Wheeler, Garfield, Loop, and Blaine. So if you have land physically located within the sandhills of those counties, then you'd be considered eligible for this program. And with reference to tree removal, what we're really trying to target are areas that have the low, even ultra low density. I mean, we will work on areas that have a moderate infestation, but we're trying to work on areas that look like this, where we can affect a lot of acres for not very much money, relatively speaking. And so the stuff that is connected to grasslands that don't have trees, or where there's not really a seed source. So after our initial treatment, in the sandhills, you might buy yourself 5 to 10 years before you need to go back and do additional work. So those are pretty common. But then we do get in areas that look like this, that are more moderately infested with cedar trees. And we'll still work on those, because a lot of times those projects are connected to areas where there hasn't been tree invasion yet, or we're just building upon other projects to try to develop a core and just have a big landscape sized area of a treeless prairie, of cedar trees anyway. So getting into some of the accomplishments, or I guess I'll back up. The other thing that we help with is the grazing infrastructure, helping them with implementing new grazing systems or adjusting something. So what we can do is help with cross fences, pipeline, tanks, solar wells, those sorts of things. Now, getting into the accomplishments, 2017 was our first year. We had 9 projects for almost 9,200 acres, and those included grazing systems and cedar removal and prescribed fire. In 2018, we had 8 projects for 12,500 acres, and that year they were prescribed grazing systems and eastern red cedar removal. 2019, we had 12 projects for 8,700 acres, and you can see similar type projects. In 2020, we had 11 projects for almost 9,400 acres. And then in 2021, we actually had 2 signups, one in the fall and winter, and then we had another sign up this summer. So we were able to get 22 projects for almost 27,000 acres. So in 6 signups, we've impacted almost 67,000 acres, and the bulk of that is cutting trees, getting rid of trees. So what does that look like on a map? And I'm sorry if you guys can't see that very well. I know there's just a big area, so it was hard to show everything, but this shows the 10-county area with all the projects we've done. That these are just EQIP, Working Lands for Wildlife projects. Some of them the partners helped with, some of them they did not for various reasons, but these are all the EQIP, Working Lands for Wildlife projects that we've done in the Eastern Sandhills during the past 6 signups. This next map shows what I just told you, in addition to partner-only projects in the Eastern Sandhills. So in the last 5 years, we've impacted 119,000 acres in the Sandhills. If you guys can see my mouse, something that's really cool is that unintentionally we've started building cores. You work with one landowner, the neighbor looks over the fence and sees what he's doing, then they inquire how to get rid of their trees. So kind of unintentionally, we've started some of these cores. We have one here in eastern Wheeler County, and then we have this one here in western Boone County, and you can kind of see some gaps there. And there's a couple reasons why one of the big reasons is those areas don't have any trees, so we don't need to work there. But then there's, sometimes they're farmed or whatever. But the point is that we're developing these cores and we're building a culture where these landowners see the importance of it, and we're having a significant impact in some of these areas. Just in these two areas here that I was talking about, we've either cut or help protect close to 2 township sizes worth of grassland. And then you can see we're starting to build some cores over in this part of the eastern Garfield, western Wheeler County. And again, there's some gaps there, and some of the reasons there are we just haven't got there yet, or they're treeless. And so it's hard to quantify, what we're really doing when you have some treeless areas, but it's nice to know we're protecting that. And then back to this core here in Wheeler County, there's probably like 12 landowners, 11 landowners. But anyway, we cut those trees. We started cutting trees in there in 2017, and so the need for fire has been addressed because we start to see some stuff coming back. And so instead of just thinking about working with one rancher on his property, we're starting in the very early stages of trying to come up with a large landscape complex size burn where multiple landowners who have ground touching each other, we're thinking about going big and making a meaningful impact to address the cedars that are starting to come back, so that we're just not wasting our money on one initial treatment. In reference with more fire stuff, we burning in the sandhills has been a slow go, but we're making great strides in the last 5-6 years. The Nature Conservancy has a prescribed burn coordinator who has been instrumental of helping us work with landowners to provide technical assistance, equipment, and sometimes even manpower to burn. And so this number you see there isn't on all of our working lands for wildlife projects, but those are fires that are occurring in the sandhills. And we're going to be getting some more equipment in the eastern sandhills to provide for landowners. Some prescribed burn trailers are coming, as well as we're trying to work with landowners to form more of a formal burn association. There's a lot of informal groups where ranchers just get together and they burn on their own, but we're trying to work in areas where that's not happening to develop these burn associations to get more fire on the ground. With that, that's all I have. If there's any time for questions, I can sure take some.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Any questions for Ryan? Go ahead and put it in the chat box or just unmute and ask a question. Okay, well, seeing none, Ryan, thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Next up is FSA and CRP review. So Doug, are you ready to take over, or Levain, or who's going to take it?
Brad, it'll be myself. It'll be Levain.
Okay.
First of all, I'm going to go ahead. I have my screen up to show who I am. I am the conservation specialist that handles CRP and ECP at the Nebraska State Office with CRP. Today, I want to talk about conservation priority areas and then an update on CRP signups. I'm going to go ahead and click off my screen because I think it works better if we don't have cameras on sometimes, and it seems like it was lagging this afternoon. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to share my screen. So let me know when you see my screen.
Okay, we see it.
Okay, I want to get it in PowerPoint mode. All right, you guys can see that?
We're not seeing your, there it is. There it is.
Okay, I didn't click on the display on the PowerPoint or the display so you can see the screen. Okay, once again, thank you for allowing me to take some of your time to address the conservation priority areas. And as I said, we're going to also talk about the update on CRP sign-up results. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, states are required to relook at the CPAs set under the 2014 Farm Bill. So in 2020, we looked at them and redid all of our conservation priority areas for the fiscal 2021 sign up 56. So every year, as I stated, under the 2018 Farm Bill, it requires the states to look at these CPAs. We just redid them for fiscal year 2021. Our option going forward is to renew what we have under the CPAs, go with our existing ones, revise those, or establish new ones. And talking with partners and just looking at not being able to use these CPAs until sign up 56, we really don't feel it was warranted to change it. So what we're asking you to do is grant or concur with the fact that we're just going to use our existing CPAs that we have set for fiscal year 2021, which is the current sign-ups we were just in, and we are finishing up as of September 30th this year. So to help you out, I kind of want to talk about, go through a little overview of how we come to establishing those CPAs, and then show you what the CPAs are that we're going to use as existing going into the fiscal year 2022. So CPAs are addressed by wildlife, water quality, and air quality zones. They are set up to achieve the desired wildlife, the water quality, and the air quality objectives. And then land physically in these zones give those producers an opportunity to enroll into general sign-up. It increases that environmental benefit index and allows them to be accepted into general sign-up. Okay. These are the steps that we had to take to set up the CPA. We have to look at the important environmental issues. We have to take this to our state committee, which we did when we developed these, and state agencies, our NRCS state conservationists, and our state technical committee. And that's what we're doing again today to be able to renew the existing CPAs. And that's what I'm bringing to you today. The other thing we looked at is Nebraska based their combination of these areas using entire counties and 12-digit HUCs. And we have to stay within the state's 25% cropland limitation. So we cannot go over that 25% cropland in the state under these CPAs. And as I stated, and what we're bringing you today is a yearly review. And today, that's what we're doing, a yearly review of our existing CPAs, and we're just going to use those going forward for fiscal year 2022. Our approach when we set up these CPAs was to target the wildlife and water quality areas in collaboration with outstate level partners. We also address priority areas and resource concerns. Targeted areas were overlaid that contained high CRP enrollment or where there was considerable interest in enrollment into general CRP with lower acceptance. So those are the areas that we want to target to get more enrollment and acceptance into general sign-up. Many areas overlapped in the targeted areas for both wildlife and water quality areas. There's just a little bit of a difference between the two, but majority of the acres are pretty equal for both wildlife and water quality. Kimball County, we looked at this last year, thinking they're the ones that are in the air quality area that would fall under all three of the air, wildlife, and water zone. But we decided not to include Kimball County because they were at their 25% cropland limitation allowed to be enrolled in CRP. And they had the highest enrollment into the CRP grasslands program. So there wasn't any benefit to use those acres under Kimball County, so we utilized those acres in different areas. Currently, cropland acres under that we have in the state of Nebraska is 21,715,087.27. So you calculate 25% of that, that's that 5,428,770 1.82 acres. And under our CPAs right now, we have 5,419,200 acres, 200.26 acres, which is under that 25 max acres that you see there in that on the slide there. Here is the conservation priority areas that we set up for this 2021 sign up that we reviewed with you. I think it was kind of the end of 2020 when we talked to you about this and set these up and brought them to you and you concurred with them. So this is what we're going to use for 2022 if you are okay with us going forward with utilizing what's in effect right now. The wildlife zones, these zones must be established in areas to contribute to the restoration of declining wildlife species of the national, regional, state, or local significance. So we have to look at that when we're determining wildlife zones. Here's the wildlife zone. It's going to be pretty similar to the overall because it's pretty equal. Wildlife zone areas were based on, we also looked at the Berggren pheasant plan and also the state wildlife action plan, which is your Nebraska Natural Legacy Project. We pulled these in and addressed those areas as well. The map on here's the Berggren pheasant plan. Majority of the area that you see in the tan and the purple are under the priority area, except for kind of that center portion of that tan area. I believe it was just Greeley and Howard that we pulled into the CPAs under this project. The majority of those acres are under CPA. And then here is the slide of the Nebraska Natural Legacy Project that we also took into consideration to pull in as many areas of this project under the CPA as well. Water quality zones shall be in areas that contribute to the reduced groundwater and surface water quality. And we've looked at that and addressed those areas or those issues. Here is our water quality zone that is set up and has been approved by National for the 21 fiscal year. Water quality zones were selected with participation of the Nebraska Department of Environmental and Energy. Areas of consideration was waters impaired by agriculture non-point source pollution. We also looked at watersheds and groundwater management areas. And we also took into consideration the active projects that were underway or planned to be underway in those areas when we set these water quality zones up. We looked at the stream segments when we addressed the water quality zones. Here we also looked at the public drinking water designation streams when we determined these areas. We looked at the most recent nitrate concentrations for the state. And then we also looked at those nitrate concentrations by township. So what I'm asking you today is if you agree to go forward with our existing CPAs and not make any changes to what I just showed you that we had used under the fiscal 2021 year, then we will go forward with these to our national office. And these would be approved for contracts that are going to be looked at October 1, 2021 through September 30 of 2022. So I don't need you to all say yes, but if you have a concern with it, maybe that's the way we need to address this, to address your concerns now that you don't want us to go forward and we want to make changes or provide any changes that you feel we should address for the next sign up. I'm going to continue on with my presentation and we can see if there's any concerns or questions in the question box when I'm done with going over the CRP sign up update.
Levain, there is
Yes.
one question. Andy, go ahead.
Levain, I was just curious if the next time we design these areas, I think you've got to have a product in place, and I commend you guys for all the work that went into that last set. I just wanted to offer that we have some new geospatial tools that we could use that really help us better understand ranges of some of those at-risk species, as well as some of our grassland birds, that where they respond greatest to putting more CRP or more habitat on the ground. That, you know, we'd be more than happy to help put those together and bundle them back to you for their 2022 review. I just wanted to throw that out there, so it was, maybe the seed was planted.
No, I appreciate that, Andy. Any assistance or any way we can get closer to targeting the species that we really need to target under these conservation priority areas would be welcomed from any agency whatsoever. We just kind of reach out to whatever partners, and so if you don't speak up that you have that capability to assist, then we're kind of out there trying to figure it out on our own. So yes, we will take it into consideration, Andy, definitely. So thank you for that. All right, let's jump into the CRP updates, sign up updates. General sign up 56 results ended, that sign up ended July 23rd. We had a notice 942 that provided us the accepted and rejected offers. Nationwide, we had 2 million acres offered. And then nationwide, 1.9 acres were accepted. The EBI cutoff score that the offer had to meet was 175 or greater. Those were the offers that were accepted. And before I go any further, I apologize. I made a lot of changes to my slide presentation on this part, and I apologize for that. But for some reason, I shouldn't have jumped into putting a PowerPoint together after a long holiday, and I pulled in the wrong offer numbers and total acre numbers. So I will push this back out to Tammy and Brad, your group, to repost for a better, more accurate information from this PowerPoint than the one that was posted for this meeting. So I apologize for that. I'll jump into the next slide. General sign-up results for Nebraska. 1,103 offers were accepted for a total acres of 78,278.95 acres. The start date of these offers will be October 1 of 2021. Regular sign-up, continuous sign-up 55. Deadline for re-enrolled or combination of re-enrolled and new land was August 6th. Total offers submitted were 544 for a total of 6,513.34 acres. And these also start October 1 of 2021 because they're re-enrolled acres, so they have to start October 1. Farmable wetland, we had same deadline there was August 6th. The offers that were submitted or approved are 26 for a total of 254.32 acres. Our heli sign up, same thing there, August 6th was our deadline. We had 52 offers for a total of 1,469.23 acres. Our CREP, we had a deadline of August 6th on re-enrolled and combination of that re-enrolled and new land of 52 acres, or 52 offers, excuse me, for a total of 4,522.78 acres. The Plat I have Plat Republican. That needs to be changed to just Clear 30. I added this slide and I didn't take it off. So Clear 30 sign up, we had 5 offers for that for a total of 28.35 acres. I'll correct that before I repost. And then continuous for new land, we don't ever have a deadline for that unless National stops us from taking offers for whatever reason. But the start date for new land going into any continuous sign up would be the first day of the month following the month the county committee or the CED approves that CRP1. In other words, the contract. That producer also has an option to defer up to 6 months, and the crop must be removed from that land before the contract can start. So that's why the deferment's there too. Sign up 203 for grasslands ended August 20th. We submitted 1,314 offers for total 500 acres of 580,413.84 acres. We still are waiting on announcement from our national office for the results. It sounds like they sent an email out earlier during this meeting that hopefully they'll have an announcement out tomorrow. If not tomorrow, I'm hoping by Monday. So right now, like I said, we're not sure of our totals there yet. As of July 31st, I just kind of put together a total acres. It's always kind of interesting to see how many acres we have under CRP. So as of July 31st, we have 1,270,834 acres enrolled in CRP. We're going to have 95,879 that are expiring this September 30th. And then in 2022, we're going to have another 80,189 expiring and 51,000 expiring. Our national office allowed us to go ahead, NRCS to use, FSA and NRCS to use interim conservation plans. The original deadline for our conservation plans to be completed is September 20th, but with the large workload and the CRP ones that have to be in effect for October 1, they allowed us to use the interim conservation plans and interim conservation plan addendums. We're authorized for CREP and non-CREP continuous sign-up 55 re-enrollments, or a combination of re-enrollment land and new land. General sign-up 56, our grassland CRP sign-up 203, and then also our clear 30 is included in the non-CREP continuous sign-up. And the final conservation plan will need to be completed by December 17th. And one thing, the producers have an option. They're signing that interim plan and not knowing for certain what they're going to have to do out there. And if they do not agree with the full-blown conservation plan, the final conservation plan, then they can back out of their offer without any penalty. So that was a little bit of extra. Given that producer the opportunity to go forward with the unknown a little bit and still have the opportunity to back out if they don't want to accept the final conservation plan that NRCS and FSA will provide to that producer. And that is all I have, unless there is any other questions for myself, Jana, or Doug.
Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Just one question, Levain. I doubt you've heard anything, but just any updates on the SAFE proposals or any of the other proposals that we submitted?
No, Andy, we haven't. I don't know if you heard anything. I'm assuming by you asking, you did not hear anything as well. But no, we haven't either.
I sent it to the
I know
black hole.
Yeah, we're sitting with all the publicity stuff that we put together, that you guys put together with Bobby, and we're still waiting. But migratory bird safe, I'm glad you brought that up, Andy, because migratory bird safe, we were put on hold last year for that. And this year we were informed that we are going to be able to start taking offers under migratory bird safe October 1, but we still have not got the authorization to do so. So as soon as we get the authorization, you guys will be seeing our publicity that we can push out to those producers and in those counties that are able to take offers under the migratory bird safe. And unless, I don't know, Eric?
Hey, Levain, I think first of all, you might want to stop sharing. I think
Thank you.
Something else that you may
Did
not
I
want to
stop
share.
now?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Thank you.
I was just gonna say that we've had some national meetings that Beverly Preston, the CRP program manager at headquarters, was on, and she provided the same information, that there was no update on when SAFE announcements, whether it be revisions to existing or the opportunity to put in a new SAFE. So that's what I just heard yesterday from Beverly. So
Yeah, and if those of you forgot, normally they push safe our grass practices under general sign up, and under this sign up, when general was re-announced after they added all the extra incentives, they allowed grass cover safe projects to be pushed back under continuous. So Nebraska didn't have one set up at the time, so we could not utilize safe as a continuous sign up. So that's what Eric is bringing up as well, along with the migratory bird that safe that Andy brought up. We're still in a holding pattern to see what we can do for an upland bird safe, and I think it was pollinator safe. We were combining those as a proposal, so we can go ahead and take continuous sign up using safe grass practices, and then the migratory bird safe was the one that Andy was talking about that has to do with our playa lakes, and we've had a sign up for that. I don't know if it's been 2 years or 3 years ago now. It's been a while. So we were pretty excited about having that sign up last year, but with all the changes to general sign up and continuous sign up with the incentives, they put our migratory bird and us allowing us to do a safe proposal for this sign up in fiscal year 21. So we're hopeful that we'll get some answers and we can go forward with these going into the 2022 fiscal year.
Okay, anything else for Levain before we move on?
Does I don't know if Doug wants to give an announcement or not. I could announce it, but if he's still on, I don't know if he wants to announce anything. Maybe I'm putting you on the spot. Sorry, Doug, but
now that you've put me on the spot, but I am planning to retire December 31st. So at least I'm assuming that's what you're referring to.
Yes, that's what I'm referring to. I wanted you to announce that because I don't know when the next state technical committee will be, and if you'll be here yet to attend that. So.
Well, I hope to. It's December 2nd, I think. On the.
Is that what they said? Okay, I missed it then. Sorry.
No, like I said, I hope to be here in time still for that. But I do appreciate. I've enjoyed working with the group for several years now since Greg left, and if some of you may even remember way back in the late 90s, I was doing the same thing back when we had state tech and CRP back then. So some of you I recognize from back then, and most of you I don't, but that's fine. Thank you.
All right, Brad, I think that's all we have unless there's any further questions for us.
Okay, well, and congratulations, Doug, I guess. Moving on. Time flies. So yeah, thank you, Levain, and everyone. So at this time, I don't have anything on the agenda. We need to start putting it back on there. But one thing we do always want to do at these state technical committee meetings is give an opportunity for all of the agencies to give us an update or provide any comments at this time that wasn't necessarily on the agenda, but anything that you like to inform the group on. Now would be a good time to hop in and do that. So if anyone cares or has any updates, go ahead and speak up or raise your hand or just go ahead and unmute and you can give us your update. Okay, well, quiet group. Everybody must be getting tired of sitting as well. So I think it's been a good meeting. And at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to John Wilson. John, if you have any wrap up or any closing comments, now go ahead and take over.
Okay, well, thank you, Brad. Certainly, I do not have anything else to add to the meeting. It was very informative, and certainly you guys went into a lot of details to give those updates. And any input that you guys would like to have to this, please feel free to communicate that with us. But I do appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule to attend this meeting, and we will definitely have that meeting early enough in December to make sure that our FSA friend is able to attend. So again, congratulations on your retirement, but we will be around, you'll be around for our next State Tech Committee. With that, I'll just turn it back over to you, Brad, and then we can close out.
Okay, with that, thank you. Thanks again, everyone. And as was mentioned, if you do think of something after we're done, go ahead and shoot me an email or give me a call or any of us, and we'll follow up. So with that, we'll close it out. And thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of your week and weekend. Thanks a lot.